Hello, everyone. We are back. AAPM 2023, booth 300, Standard Imaging, the exhibit hall in Houston. And we're so excited to be back here with this another little mini episode. Rob Krauss is going to be joining us to chat about MPPGs from Memphis, Tennessee, St. Francis Hospital. Did I get that right? I think so. Thank you, Rob, so much for coming over to join us to chat about MPPGs. I know that I have certainly heard bits and pieces here and there, and there's certainly some confusion surrounding the topic. So I'm glad that you're here to kind of clear some things up for us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. So to kick things off, and I'll ask you the exact same question I asked you when we were chatting earlier today. What is MPPG? How are they different from? Because when I hear that term, my brain files it in TGs.
Yeah, so that's not just a question that you have. It's a question that a lot of people have. And we're working on trying to really explain that better. Generally, the idea is that task reports, for the physicists and other folks that have read them, they always have a disclaimer that they're not supposed to be used for regulations and such, because generally they're more broad, kind of all-encompassing, and it's different. And so you may not need to do things exactly the way the TGs are suggesting. Unfortunately, some states don't read the disclaimers, and they have taken them quite literally and adopted them whole document. And that has been burdensome for physicists, and it's been difficult in certain states that have done that. So it really started as an attempt to kind of say, no. Here is what the minimum guidelines really are, so that they take the information from task groups and other publications and hold the science from those and come up with clearly minimum guidelines. That's why I actually have it here, because just so I can read on the website, on the AAPM website where the MPPGs live. So they are intended to provide the medical community with a clear description of the minimum level of medical physics support that AAPM would consider to be prudent in all clinical practice settings. And there's some more words here that, but that's what they are. So we'll take say task group 142, which a lot of griping about physicists because it's very broad. And then take MPPG 8, for example, which is LINAC quality assurance. Our TG 142 has more than just LINAC quality assurance, but we're going to take the portion of it that refers to the LINAC quality assurance. So what MPPG 8 did is it took some of the tests from 142 and then looked at what of all these tests, what is the frequency and the tolerance levels for these tests that would be the minimum guideline. And so it's just an example of pulling the science from the TGs and other documents and then compiling a minimum set of guidelines. And that's what they're intended for. Also for the accrediting bodies to adopt the MPPGs as their minimum, because again, each clinic is different. So the TG142 doing all that may not make sense for a particular clinic, but there is a floor, where there is a basic set of minimum guidelines where that if you're not doing these minimum guidelines, then you're probably not providing adequate care.
See. That's interesting. The TGs are very there's a lot there.
And there's a lot of them.
Right, that is true. There's a lot of them. It can be difficult to stay abreast of the latest, the latest and greatest of best practices.
Right, and that's another thing that is kind of baked into the MPPG idea, is that if you go back 30 years, even 40 years in AAPM, there was really only 3 documents that really comprehensively touch LINAC QA. I mean, there are a lot of other documents that touch on it, but that are kind of comprehensive. And you go back to Report 13 from the 80s, and then you have TG 40 in the 90s, and then you have TG 142 in the mid 2008, 2010. So you have a large gap, and so you're missing things. I mean, TG 40 didn't have anything about MLCs. TG 142 barely had anything about MLCs. And so you just miss a lot. So the MPPGs are updated every 5 years if necessary. And if anyone looks at the publication dates, it's actually closer to 6 years. The goal is 5 years. We're actually working on the subcommittee and practice guidelines is working on improving that and getting them out quicker. There's some growing pains that we're still working through as the body gets bigger, but still 6 years is a lot different than 15.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Well, things shift so quickly in our industry, so that the more frequent updates is, I'm sure, greatly appreciated. Yeah. So minimum guidelines. I know that's a very specific way of phraseology there, which I know you'd explain to me in greater detail. That it's not necessarily rote, not necessarily like this is what to do, but a guideline.
Yeah, it's a guideline. It's the closest that physicists are ever going to have from the APM of giving that. Here's the minimum to do, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is there's a liability part where you can't say it's standard per se because we're not a regulatory body, we're not an accrediting body, so we can't do that. But two, it's also in some ways designed not to say just do these. Every clinic's different. So if you are doing just the MPPG, you're probably not doing it right because there are probably parts of your clinic that need to do more.
I see.
If you're doing more complicated cases in the LINAC world, or you're more complicated cases in the diagnostic world, there are things that you're probably going to have to be more robust than what the MPPGs say. And so that's another reason why it's a guideline. It's not that this is bare minimum, that's all you have to do. This is the floor, build on the floor. And then you also have, in the last 10 years, we've really pushed TG100 and doing FMEA.
Yeah.
And if you do FMEA, the MPPGs kind of serve as a sanity check of the floor. If your FMEA comes out where you should be doing something below what the MPPGs suggest, you might want to check your methodology again. And ultimately, again, you're going to have a custom. If you go through an FMEA process, you're going to have a customized QA program for whatever you're looking at for your clinic, and you just use kind of use ACT. Okay, we're doing here. Nothing dropped below, so it's a sanity check that we are providing the care with our facilities.
Yeah. So best practices are followed, not necessarily exceeded, but nothing falls through the cracks.
Yes, that's right.
So there's a good balance there, I feel like.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we're also trying to do is harmonize. You have these minimum guidelines, but at the same time, we're also pushing FMEA. That is what we should all be doing. But there is also some, and this is me speaking out. I'm not representing any particular group in APM, but it also, the reality is that we have a huge worker shortage in physics work right now. So FMEA may be a goal right now. We may not be able to do it with the staffing that's there. So MPPGs, again, is something you can fall back on. And that's to know that if you're doing that, you're providing a minimum of care. That's not an excuse to not do things that you think that should be done above those in your particular clinic.
Right.
But again, it's in some ways a safety net to ensure that you are doing this at least.
That's good that there's a safety net there. It's good that there's there's a resource there to reach out to.
Physicists from when I started in grad school in 2007, I've always heard that they always want the APM to come out with what is the minimum that we have to do.
Yeah.
Right? Now that the attitude isn't like, oh, I don't want to do any work. The attitude is like, okay, how do I triage? If we're in this busy environment. The MPPGs are about as close as the APM is ever going to come to say this is the bare minimum that you can do. Because again, it's not a standard; it's a guideline, but that's about as good as we're going to get. So.
Yeah, interesting. Well, yeah, and you do make a point there. We were chatting earlier about the different ways, the different ways different states interpret the TGs and the different guidelines, I guess, that are followed in different parts of the country. Because it's just definitely true. There's a wide way folks approach these things, and different facilities even intrastate. There's different facilities implement policies and procedures and protocols differently. So it's nice to be able to kind of look toward one source for a minimum guideline.
And the other thing is that they serve as a great resource because they're heavily referenced. So they're pulling all the science in to come up with what those minimum guidelines are.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a 50, 60, 70 references that, if you want to know more about a particular topic, there's a reference right there. So it's, that's another kind of secondary thing is you have again, updated every 5 years. So you have an updated list of references every 5 years. Now, that's not really what their intent is, but it is a side effect. And it is something good you can look at if you want to look more on a specific topic.
Yeah, a positive side of it.
Yes.
So there,
Yeah.
It seems like there's some use there. But you and I spoke earlier too about the benefits and the gain internationally on the global stage when it comes to the global community of medical physics and radiation oncology. There's definitely there's an advantage to having the MPPGs there.
Yeah. So the AAPM is obviously it's for the United States, but we have the first country we think of AAPM is Canada because we have a really close relationship with DMP. And actually in some of the MPPGs sites with the Canadian friends and what they've done, we use that as a resource. But beyond that, and more importantly, is that there are a lot of organizations across the globe that don't have the resources to develop their own documents, or they're just say, well, we're going to use our resources widely. And another group's already come up with it, so why do we need to do it separately? And a task group like 142 would be extremely difficult for some countries to implement. And in fairness, MPPGs, some of them are not going to have the resources to do those, but they are a little bit more accessible and all offer a more comprehensive and updated goal. Yes.
Yeah. Something to look to.
Yes.
Right, for sure. Things do, and then mentions already things change so quickly. The more consistent updates are really appreciated. We seem to have a lot of resources. It's not the case every time.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
So there's a lot of looking on the outside to pull little bits and pieces, and best practices are always the goal for sure. So we hope so.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right, yeah. It's interesting. You would think that it's a highly, there's a lot of regulation. There is. There's a lot of particulars for accreditation, things of that nature. When it comes to daily practice, having the variations kind of covered with one umbrella.
Yeah, and when some of these first came out, I'm a solo physicist, and so there are choices that you have to make in your own clinic as well. The things, the QA that you're going to do, the different procedures you're going to do, and then to have these documents come out and kind of, let's say, verify. But it kind of is. It's a little sigh of relief that you have someone come and say, okay, that was a reasonable choice to make. Or I'm not that far off. When it's a more practical document, like the MPPGs are, which is I consider.
Yeah, very practical. Well, and you're right. So there are the solo groups. The individual that's monitoring a couple of places. Because then your time, you've only got 24 hours in the day. If you have sleep aid.
Well, that's been it's been kind of a anecdotal complaint that I've heard over the years, that the documents that the AAPM puts out are more academic, and that was a big complaint to Teaching 142. And to be honest, the reality is it was, but that was that each clinic takes it and adapts it how they need to. But because some of these states and accrediting bodies have basically adopted it as wholehearted gospel, then it reinforced that. And when the MPPGs came out, it was kind of almost a sigh of relief for a lot of clinical physicists and themselves, because it was kind of here's something practical. Here is a reduction down to something that is achievable, doable, and basically a floor that we can build on for our own programs when our resources are limited.
Yeah, that's true. When limited resources are something we're all facing. I talk about it constantly here on the show. because it's so important.
Have you seen the job board out there? It's 3 times what it was just a couple years ago.
I noticed last year too at WPM the job board was huge and bigger
Bigger
still this year. Yeah.
And the resumes, there's only this months of resumes and jobs.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. Excuse me. And something that I know I spoke earlier with Brian Pellegrini about opening new residency programs to get more people on the ground, to get booths out there, so we can fill these seats and then garner more support for the field. There's a lot of work to do, but we've come along.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways it would use help in some ways because there's so many ways, like resources where it compiles a lot of resources together in the references, and just the text itself gives you that sanity check of, okay, if I have to make a choice, I'm not doing it exactly the way the TG says, but I'm making a choice based on what I have available, and you have that sanity check.
Yeah, and that floor, the sanity check, as you call it, is so important. So important for those, because there's a great deal of responsibility involved. It's a big deal for us. So having that, backup there.
Yeah, and that's not to, I'd be remiss to say that that doesn't replace the.
Fly wants to be my best friend. Have you noticed?
Yeah. That doesn't replace the goal of doing your root cause analysis, your FMEA. And
Sure.
Those are things that we should be doing. But the reality is now is that things happen. We don't maybe have the resources to go to do that. We may not have the money to do that. And until we do that, MPPGs are a good basis to build a program. Smart.
This fly, so we have this fly that just wants to be my friend. So excited for me. Oh geez, there he is. Water or fly strip. Anyway, such important work. And where are we at now? What's new with the MPPG process? What's going on next week?
So there's a couple new ones that just came out this year. There's the update to MPPG 4, MPPG 4B, which is the development, implementation, and maintenance of safety checklists. Mm-hmm. We have MPPG 13A, which is HCR brachytherapy that came out this year. There's actually a part B that is currently under development. Hopefully will be coming out pretty soon. And there is really important one. I'm not to say that they're not all important, but in LINAC world, MPPG 5B came out last year. That's for treatment planning, system commissioning, and QA.
Okay.
It has got some really good work in there. I actually just used it for a new beam recently, and followed it. It's great, and not too bad process. So there are several in various stages of publication right now.
Mm-hmm.
Are in the process of being published. There's a multi-step process that they have to go through reviews in AAPM and then with JCAMP journal.
Mm-hmm.
So they are thoroughly reviewed for consistency in the science and consistency with other APM documents. And so it's when they come out, there's probably been I don't know, maybe 12 to 20 different members of APM, various committees that have reviewed it, plus the writing group itself, the parent committee, SPG, and then they go through a member comment period too. And I would say personally, having done this, every single comment that is received is at bare minimum read, and in almost all cases responded to in some way. So even the member comments, the authors respond to the comment. They may not make any changes, but the rationale why it was not is usually just a quick blurb. So when you have an opportunity to make comments, when you see that, you get that email for member comments, it's in our document that's currently under review right now. We made a few changes based on member comments.
Wow.
So that's important. It's your chance to take ownership of these things, and it's not just lip service. We do make changes based on member comments. So
Interact. I mean, and that adds to the quality of the end product, the end result. Because you've got that feedback, right? That's really good to know. It's really amazing. So check your emails then and respond to those inquiries.
Yeah, because there's usually a link to a draft, a PDF draft of the document. You can read it, and then there's a way to get feedback on it.
Amazing. Okay. So thank you for the update on those. That's really great. And we can find all of these things on AAPM.org.
Yes, they have their own little place that they live, MPPGs. It's just aapm.org/pub/MPPG, or you can go to when you go to apm.org, you can click publications, and then there's a link for MPPGs.
Yeah.
And there's a good 2 paragraphs on the rationale explanation of what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then each MPPG also has a boilerplate section that again explains the rationale.
So lots of information to be found there. And should somebody have questions for you or any of that happens from time to time,
Yes.
are you on LinkedIn?
I am.
There you go. Okay. So on LinkedIn, if you have any questions, and or reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect you with to answer any questions you may have, because I know they're out there.
Mm-hmm.
I get questions regularly from the podcast because we have such a wide international listener base as well as domestic here in the States regarding questions about best practices. So I'll be happy to connect you.
Yeah, and there's a whole subcommittee that deals with the MPPGs. And Patrick, great guy, he's the chair of that committee, and he is very knowledgeable as well. So reach out to him too if you have questions.
Absolutely, happy to make those connections. Sure. Rob, thank you again so much for taking time out of your trip here to Houston to chat with us and share your knowledge about MPPGs. I think it's a really important topic. It's something that it really deserves a bigger spotlight than the mini episode. So
I think so.
I'll be asking you, chasing you down here to do a full Out of the Gray episode with us so that we can publish it on our podcast page.
Hopefully the 8B will be released soon, and I can talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk about changes and have an actual fresh document you can actually
That's great. Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that was in review now, right?
Yes.
Or soon to be, or
there's like 3 or 4 right now in various stages of review. 2 of them very close to being published.
Okay, very excited. So we'll look forward to an update at our next chat too. One of those things, but I certainly appreciate it. I know we've still got 2 more days here in the exhibit hall, so we're still got some conference show left to go yet. Lots of presentations. Yeah, have you heard any good ones up there?
Yeah, a few good ones. It's a lot more professional talk. I guess
Interesting.
A lot more discussions on interdepartment relations.
Yes.
Things like that. So
That's an important aspect of what we do that I feel like the field is growing into.
yes, and we don't get any training on it.
Right.
And also we talked about this staffing issue, it's becoming more and more important because there are more and more issues that we feel we don't have much control over, and we have to communicate.
Yes, absolutely. Communication is so important. Ever learning, ever growing, and we mentioned this a couple of times now. Our field is changing constantly. So as we fold in new modalities and bring in diagnostics and different modalities, these interdepartmental communication ever more every day. Oh gosh. Well, that's interesting then. Okay. So some good conversations yet to be had still. I know tomorrow we'll be chatting earlier in the week. So some social events here as well. So if you're in the area, if you're in Houston and you have the opportunity to pop into the exhibit hall here to say hi, please do. We're here in booth 300, standard imaging booth. And we have Mr. Krauss here walking around as well. So do pop in and say hi if you can. join us.
Thanks for having me.
We will have another live episode here for you. I think this is our last one for today. We may have an afternoon or a surprise guest pop in, but if we don't, then we will see you tomorrow. So thank you so much, folks. We'll see you again.